A surprise attack Saturday by Hamas left dozens dead in Israel. Gaza militants launched thousands of rockets.
A month of relentless bombing has decimated the territory. This is the chaotic aftermath of an Israeli airstrike on the Maghazi refugee camp.
The bodies of more than 100 Palestinians who died at Al Shifa and Beit Hanun hospitals have been buried in a mass grave in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. Bodies have been stuck at the hospitals for several days as the Israeli army refused to allow them to be moved. The Gaza Health Ministry says 14,128 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli attacks.
On October 7th, 2023, Hamas launched an attack that killed 1,400 people. Since then, the Israeli government has killed over 10,000 Palestinian people, at least 47% of whom are children. At least 1,270 children are missing and assumed to be under rubble. And at least 41 journalists have been killed, 36 of whom are Palestinian. But this conflict does not begin with Hamas or on October 7th. In 1948, the United Nations defined genocide as, quote, any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group, as such, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births from within that group, and forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Make no mistake about it, we are witnessing the genocide of the Palestinian people. In the Bahamas, we have a saying, a liar is a thief and a thief is a murderer. A liar is a thief and a thief is a murderer. It's something I've said my entire life without ever considering its origins, how far back it must go, what a colonized people must have seen, must live with daily, to regularly say a liar is a thief and a thief is a murderer. Now I find myself wondering who the first Bahamian was to say it. Was it the first Arawak slaughtered or the last one enslaved? Because colonized people know all too well that before you are murdered, before you have your land, culture, and resources stolen, you are lied to and about by the people who intend to rob and kill you. And it doesn't happen once. It happens in perpetuity, so that you experience theft and murders that began a century before you even came into this world. Palestinian people know that. Britain, a colonizer that I, a Bahamian and citizen of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, knows all too well, took control of Palestine following the defeat of the Ottoman Empire during the Great War from 1917 to 1919. Britain, not the Palestinian people, then ruled Palestine under a League of Nations mandate that established that Britain was committed to establishing a national home for Jewish people in Palestine.
All of the world had already been conquered and divided by colonial powers. There was no else in the world left to be conquered or divided by colonial powers. This is the time when Zionism comes to rise. Zionism comes to look for a state when everywhere else in the world is already dominated. Thus, in order for Mr. Herzl to get a country for Zionists, what he did was to attach himself to imperialism, British imperialism in this case. The legal foundation of the State of Israel is what is known as the Balfour Declaration. This declaration was issued in 1917. A man in the government of Britain named Balfour wrote a paper and promised the Jews a national home. The national home he promised them was an area which Britain was colonizing, Palestine. Palestine didn't belong to the British. Just like Ireland doesn't belong to the British, even though they have troops there. But here, these British imperialists signed a note and gave it to the Jews and they accepted it. Where is the morality for this? If you say that Israel belongs to you, then you don't go to a thief to get Israel, you go and take it. Once you go to an immoral being such as British imperialism, and this is the basis for you getting the land, then clearly here those who are truly liberation fighters must question this.
Palestinian people feared displacement and engaged in nonviolent protest. In 1939, Britain, anticipating another war in Europe and wanting the support of the Arab states who wanted their freedoms, announced that the Jewish national home had been fulfilled. and that they would cap the Jewish migration in Palestine at 75,000 over the next 5 years, while they came up with a plan for the Palestinian people to govern themselves and become independent. What happened instead was World War II. Jewish people became the victims of one of the greatest atrocities in human history, the Holocaust. And as a result, Jewish people needed somewhere to go. They needed a safe haven. They decided to migrate to Palestine. The problem, however, is that Palestine was already occupied by the Palestinian people. This is what Palestine looked like in 1946. As you can see, there were Jewish people already living in Palestine with the Palestinian people. The problem is that the Israeli government didn't and doesn't want to live with Palestinian people. They wanted to. They want to. They did and they do expel Palestinians from the land.
אנחנו מטילים מצור מוחלט על העיר עזה. אין חשמל, אין מזון, אין מים, אין דלק. כל סגור. אנחנו נלחמים בחיות אדם ואנחנו נוהגים בהתאם.
The Israeli Defense Force was founded on May 26, 1948 as a military. This is what Palestine looked like by 1949. This is what it looks like today. The conflict in Gaza did not begin on October 7th. The Palestinian people have been victims of violence and settler colonialism for generations and generations. They have been resisting for generations and generations. At least 21,544 Palestinians have been killed since the year 2000. The Jewish people have been persecuted throughout history, and that persecution persists today.
There is a very long and deep and intense and real history of anti-Semitism, not just in this country, but around the world. You go back hundreds of years, you go back thousands of years, and you see that the hatred of Jewish people is something that unfortunately has not only not wavered, but in some ways increased at various moments in history. And certainly at this moment, we see another spike. So I think that the concern about anti-Semitism is very real. And I think the mixing of anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism creates a space where people who legitimately have a critique of Israel as a state, as a government, are being conflated with people who hate Jews because they're Jewish. And I think that we can't allow those things to mix, but we have to be resolved to fight both of them simultaneously. That is to say, we can't ignore anti-Semitism.
But one oppression does not negate another. Having experienced oppression does not give you the excuse to oppress another.
We also can't allow our fear of being called anti-Semitic to stop us from challenging the occupation of the West Bank or the siege on Gaza or a largely illiberal Israeli government that's moving more and more to the right every week, every month, every election cycle. We gotta be able to do all those things at once.
And that is something that thousands and thousands of Jewish people all around the world and right here in America have been saying as they protest, call for peace, denounce Zionism, and stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people.
I'm Jewish, I'm Israeli. My parents were the only survivors of their families from the Holocaust. They both survived Auschwitz. I'm not going to support genocide, am I?
I'm here with maybe 1,000 others, a lot of us Jews, but we are here to protest the genocide that is happening in our name.
And they're getting arrested for it, which is both an example of the danger and illogical silliness that comes with conflating anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, as well as it demonstrates the danger and power of an American police state. I wholeheartedly believe that colonization is an evil that should make the most fervent of believers question whether there is a God. And I'm not privileged in many ways, but I believe that the genocide that we are witnessing requires that I, a person who can speak without fear of losing my life, speak plainly. The Palestinian people have continuously been robbed of autonomy, liberation, and humanity.
You know, I begin from the place of saying, no matter who we are, no matter what the issue is, we got to begin from a place of justice. We got to ask the question, you know, what does justice require? And we have a duty to speak out on behalf of everybody who is catching hell. For me, that means that we speak out against anti-Semitism. It means we speak out against Islamophobia. We speak out against transphobia. We speak out against police violence. We speak out against all the things, and we can't allow there to be an exception for any issue. The stakes of the issue, the political danger of the issue may shape how we organize or how we speak, and it may shape our tactics. They shouldn't shake our resolve to do the right thing.
Zora Neale Hurston warned us that if you're silent about your pain, they'll kill you and say you enjoyed it. Recently, I've been feeling like we're living the consequences of a more dangerous iteration of that quote, that our silence to the Palestinians' pain is what enabled the Israeli government to kill them and expect us to enjoy it. As generations of Palestinian people are wiped out, I know that a government doesn't just wake up one day confident enough to genocide a people on the world stage with billions of people watching without having first been given indication by those people or their representatives that we would applaud, or at the very least, close our eyes to it. And indicated we did each and every time the US government annually supported to aid Israel's militarized occupation of Palestine. Each and every time we stayed quiet while someone was fired or punished for speaking up for Palestinian liberation. Each time that we let our fear of being erroneously labeled an anti-Semite prevent us from speaking up. Each time we refused to challenge the intentional conflation of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism.
If I'm critiquing the state and it's a Jewish state, then it can very easily be seen as critiquing the Jewish state because it's Jewish, which would be anti-Semitic, right? If I approve of a state, except for the fact that it's Jewish in character, that would be a problem. But the critique of the Jewish state is not because it's Jewish. I have a similar critique of every state that not a state of all of its citizens. I have a critique of religious governments. I have like Islamic republics. I have a critique of secular governments, like the Israeli government's not a religious state per se. It's a secular government, secular democratic state, but everyone doesn't have the same rights and access, despite the fact that they say that they do. That's the criticism. But it's very easy to conflate those two things. And again, part of the project of political Zionism has been to conflate those two things, so that it's not a coincidence. It's not like it's not a bad faith interpretation on the behalf of critics. Rather, it is that there's a movement of Jewish nationalism into historic Palestine, and the national identity is not Israeli; it's Jewish, right? When you have an Israeli passport, your national identity is Jewish or Arab or Druze. So again, Jewish isn't just a religious identity, and it's not just an ethnic identity, right? It's an ethno-national identity. So all of these factors create a context where you can have a legitimate critique of the Israeli government and still wrongly be viewed as being critical of the Jewish state because it's Jewish, or of Jewish people because they're Jewish. And those conflations make it very, very challenging.
But please make no mistake about this. Anti-Semitism is real, and it's a function of white supremacy. And we need to call that out explicitly now more than ever. Follow me. Chris Rock has an old joke from his stand-up, The Bigger and Blacker, where he argues that Black people do not differentiate between different kinds of white people. That we do not hate Jews, we hate all white people. And all white people, whether Jewish or Romanian, are still just white in the eyes of Black people.
I ain't never been in the barbershop and heard a bunch of brothers talking about Jews. Black people don't hate Jews, Black people hate white people. We don't got time to dice white people up into little groups. I hate everybody. I don't care if you just got here. Hey, I'm Romanian, you Romanian cracker.
And he's right. Most Black people do not distinguish between white people. We don't see the distinctions that groups of who we perceive as white people make amongst each other. Many Black people are unaware of the prejudices, histories, or how certain groups of today's white people were not always considered such, think Armenians, or that anti-Semitism is a specifically white supremacist belief system. Like if you were in high school history class and you had to list what groups white supremacists, or more specifically, the KKK targeted, Jews would be on that list right next to Black people and homosexuals. Although we as Black people see Jewish people as just white people, and their whiteness is real and actionable in many ways, the white supremacist movement has always racialized them and vilified them as a threat to the true white social and political dominance. Think Hitler and his Aryan race shit. The central feature of anti-Semitism and the white power movement being to position Jewish people as an all-powerful secret owners and controllers of the world, media, entertainment, and as people manipulating Black and other non-white people to challenge the true whites' dominance. If you can't decipher white from the true whites, you're going to miss the white supremacy they're actually peddling to you when you hear people telling you that Jews control everything. And that's often why so many Black people fall prey to anti-Semitic white supremacist talking points when Kanye West starts spewing them, and don't see the connection between those anti-Semitic viewpoints and him palling around with out and proud white nationalists and Holocaust deniers like Nick Fuentes. It's easy for folk to just uncritically soak up the idea that Jewish people control everything, but it's much harder to show them how that fundamentally empowers white supremacy and in turn hurts us. I'm afraid that intentional conflation of anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism is going to unwittingly lead to more anti-Semitism down the line and fracture solidarity between our communities. Why do I say that? Because people already uncritically ate up the idea that Jewish people control everything and that you can't say anything to or about Jews without fear of losing your livelihood or having your life destroyed. If they were already partial to that idea, and now they're being told that Jewish people are synonymous with the Israeli government, and they watch the Israeli government genocide of brown people and everybody, especially the black people that they see just speaking up for the Palestinian people's right not to be wiped out of existence, not against Jewish people, are equivocated to an anti-Semite and stripped professionally, it will be impossible to divorce people from the white supremacist notions that have endangered Jewish people all throughout history and will further endanger them in unimaginable ways if other marginalized groups that have historically stood by them stop. And none of that is the fault of the Jewish people.
This is not a Jewish conspiracy. This is a political formation that we have in the United States, where the United States has a political interest in certain things. We have political interest in the Middle East looking a certain way. We have political interest in Africa looking a certain way. We have political interest in Latin America looking a certain way. As a country, the United States, our relationship with Israel is an important one. And so the United States protects that interest. So again, this isn't about Jewish power conspiring. That's an anti-Semitic myth, trope, and lie. This is about American political interests at play. And America's political interest is to be uncritical of Israel and to make sure that people who are marginal.
We dropped the ball by not challenging this earlier, by not standing together loudly to make it easier to challenge this earlier. And we owe it to each other, to the Palestinian people, and to the Jewish people to call this out. Palestinian people, Jewish people deserve to live. All people do. Every single person who is allowed to draw breath on this earth has a right to life, to dignity, to self-determination, and to not be murdered, blown to bits because of wars, politics, and ideological disputes between governments, regimes, or anything in between.
Working back from that endpoint means that we got to figure out how to get people organized and together. I think that we can get a free Palestine. When I say free Palestine, just to be clear, I'm talking about freedom, safety, dignity, justice, and self-determination for everybody in that region. It's not as I don't think the Palestinian freedom comes at the expense of Jewish people. I don't think it comes at the expense of neighboring countries. I don't think it comes at the expense. I think we can figure out a model that works.
They have that right, not when or only if they are mothers or children. They have it because they drew breath on this earth. If you can only extend sympathy or the desire to spare the lives of the children, or you feel that you can only appropriately invoke sympathy or grace for your position by emphasizing women and children, you simply do not, you cannot recognize the humanity of a people, whether they be Palestinian or Israeli. You do not care for a child whose home you would destroy, whose parents you would kill, whose family you would let them grow without. And I don't say this to you as an expert on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I say it as someone who has come to the conclusion that our silence enables the murder of the Palestinian people. I will be damned they say I enjoyed it. About a year ago, a woman approached my daddy in the bank at home in the Bahamas and told him he needs to tell his daughter, me, to be careful about all them things she's saying in America. And my daddy decidedly told her not to worry about his daughter or get in her business because I know what I'm doing. That I'd been in America a long time and that America was not like the Bahamas. We could speak on things and openly advocate and challenge the government and authorities in a way that we could not or was not commonplace or so likely to be supported with the social media following in the Bahamas. And that has always been my father's stance. He follows me on social media, Twitter, believe it or not. He reads my articles, he watches my shows, and he has never ever offered me criticism or instruction about what he believes I should or shouldn't do. Without being prompted, my daddy, a man who never offers his 2 cents or worries about my advocacy, begged me profusely not to comment on what's happening in Palestine. The WhatsApp messages from my daddy read, quote, "The best place to watch and get the accurate account and perspective of this Israeli-Hamas conflict or war is on Al Jazeera. All the US stations are biased or censored. You can tell a few commentators on MSNBC like Al Sharpton or Joy Reid want to tell the truth, but they are gagged. If they truly speak their minds, they will be fired instantly, and they cannot afford that. Caps lock, please don't touch that subject on your show. Stay away from it, or they will destroy you. If you are ever questioned about it, just say your thoughts and prayers are with the innocent victims on both sides and say no more." End quote. I hold my father in incredibly high esteem. And I know that if he stops working long enough to fire me off 6 WhatsApp messages in the middle of the day, he is worried that I'm going to make a grave mistake. And he wasn't alone in that worry, or in his inkling that he had a daughter who would open herself up to the firing squad by weighing on this issue. Because in addition to already firing off more than a few tweets, I have been thinking about doing an Olay and Friends episode on Palestine. If you've never seen Olay and Friends, it's a segment on my show where I get 5 Black commentators, content creators, thinkers, or professionals to discuss specific issues in depth. When I attempted to organize that, I had confirmed what I already know, what we all already know, that you can be an advocate, you can be a loud radical, you can speak against colonialism, imperialism, fascism, war, racism, and genocide. And you can even have a platform and a following for doing all of those things for any number of issues, but you dare not do it in service of the Palestinian people. Dare not do it in service of Palestinian liberation. You dare not express compassion for the Palestinian people. You dare not recognize them as a people, as deserving of life, humanity, and self-determination. My friends, people who spend their lives being advocates, rocking the boat, saying the things no one else will, begged me not to talk about Palestine. But that if I must, to please not sacrifice the careers of 5 other Black people. My friend said, Yemi, please, dog, people already getting in trouble, losing their jobs, being blackballed, and now they won't be able to advocate for Black people and do the work they were already doing and that they need to do. And I mean, what could I say? That they're wrong? I could fix my mouth to say that when I know that my friend Marc Lamont Hill was fired from CNN for speaking in support of Palestinian liberation at the UN. As Black law students lose their law firm job offers, while NYU students get targeted, when I myself explicitly warned young Black students that I know who are in vulnerable positions with everything to lose to be careful about saying anything that could cost them dearly.
I mean, I think everybody's to make their own choices. There are people who tell me every day, hey, you got fired from CNN and now you can't be a sane, critical, or radical voice on CNN in advocacy of Black people or poor people in the United States or queer people in the United States or elderly people in the United States or whatever the thing is, right? Because you got fired taking a principled position on this cause that you can't talk about anything else. And I get that. And I can't say there aren't days where I think about that and where I'm not frustrated or sad. Those are the stakes. But I'd like to believe that if we organize properly and we all speak up, we can't all be canceled. We can't all be fired. We can't all be marginalized. I mean, even right now, when you see 300,000 people in DC and you see the voices get more normalized, the radical voices get more normalized, what happens? Now you can turn on MSNBC or CNN or maybe not Fox, but MSNBC or CNN or mainstream outlets, and you hear people calling for a ceasefire, which was impossible before. Right now, 7 members of Congress between the House and Senate are calling for a ceasefire, but 2 years ago it would have been 0. I'm claiming the victories. And so I think it's only a divisive issue. It only is a career-ending issue if we continue to allow people to stand by themselves. Everybody got to make their own decision, but I will say, and I never want to tell people to make a choice that they have to pay for, right? I'll be like, oof, that was you lost your job. Well, you know, like I can't replace that. You know what I'm saying? I can't support, I can't, but I firmly believe that we're going to see a free Palestine before my life is over. And I'm not sure that I was certain of that 5 years ago, or maybe not even 1 year ago.
So I dared the idea of doing an Olay and Friends or an episode on Palestine, but it bothered me deeply for several reasons. The first thing I tried to tell myself was, I don't need to speak on everything. There are thousands or millions of people speaking on Palestine. Me speaking or not speaking won't change anything. But I know that's not true. Or at the very least, I know that I don't believe that it's true. Not in my heart. If I believed that, I wouldn't do any of the work I do, would I? Because I believe generally that we're all being intentionally misinformed and indoctrinated by propaganda from a government and its media so that we continue supporting systems and structures that oppress us. And so most of my career in life revolves around speaking out and educating people on the issues that matter to me in hopes that I can help shift social consciousness and we can make a collective request for change. And I know that that matters. If no one does that, we never know better and we never do better. And that's one of the main reasons that so many of America's progressives seem to be progressive about everything but Palestine. Because one, they don't know better. And I'm not immune. Almost 3 years ago, I tweeted, quote, Angela Davis commented that people often don't advocate for Palestine because they don't think they're informed enough or that they need to be experts. Admittedly, that's been my exact reason for staying out of that conversation, but I'm going to reflect on that position. And reflect on it, I did. But I realize, I think that there are some topics, or some causes, some issues where I am required to speak up, even if just to be a part of the collective, where I am not the expert and I don't know enough to be the expert, but I know enough to know what position I should take.
Yeah, I mean, we can't be an expert on everything, but that doesn't mean we can't speak. I mean, first of all, most of the people in Congress who are supporting this legislation and who are funding $3-4 billion a year aren't experts on this issue. But I don't need to be an expert to know that thousands of babies being killed is a moral atrocity. Just like I didn't need to be an expert to know that 1,400 Israelis killed on October 7th was a moral atrocity. I just, as a human being, can make certain determinations. Now, we get analysis and we get, smarter, and it helps us make decisions about what policy moves to make. But what people are seeing, what they're feeling in their gut, they're not wrong. We study, we learn to get a more complicated analysis. But when I see a school shooting, I don't have to be an expert on education, guns, weapons, or anything else to know that this isn't okay. And no one expects us to be. All these people marching to be pro-lifers, they're not biologists, they're not scientists, they're not doctors. They have no expertise in this issue, but they know enough to feel morally compelled to make their decisions.
But in addition to not knowing any better because they're uninformed, people are too scared to inform them. Because anti-Zionism has been intentionally and falsely conflated with anti-Semitism to scare people out of ever criticizing the Israeli government or speaking in support of Palestinian liberation. And that is how the status quo is maintained, how the powers that be keep that power, how millions of people can blindly and vehemently support oppression. And I know that. So I couldn't justify my silence on those grounds, that speaking didn't matter. So that brought me to my friend's second point, that the cost of us as Black people in America, whose core work is focused on liberating Black people in America, speaking on Palestine could cost us our ability to do that. And that's a much more serious point I couldn't so easily dismiss. And it's something I continue to think about because it's complicated. There are Black people who think Black people shouldn't concern ourselves with the plight of Palestinian people because they wouldn't or don't care about our plight as Black people.
I hope the Arabs in the West Bank in Gaza, I hope they get all they get. I hope they are protected. I hope nobody dies. I hope those babies' lives are safe. I hope the women are cared for. I hope that there's no bloodshed, no violence. But if you think I'm going to take time out of struggling for African people, if you think I'm going to stop my agenda to liberate my people, to go cry for people who don't cry for me, if you think I'm going to stop what I'm doing and pay attention to what's going on over there when y'all don't even pay attention to what's going on in Africa. Y'all don't pay attention to what's going on in Ethiopia. Y'all don't pay attention to what's going on in the Congo. The greatest humanitarian crisis in the world is in the Congo, not the West Bank. I said the greatest humanitarian crisis in the world is in the Congo, not the West Bank, not the Gaza Strip, not Israel, but in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So don't tell me I got to cry for whites and browns. I'm crying for Black people.
While I am sure that there is anti-Blackness in Palestine, as the entire world is anti-Black, including even most Black countries which have been colonized and had systems and schools of white supremacist thought downloaded onto us. One, that does not make our struggles as colonized people any less connected.
There's a large, increasing number of dark-skinned people swelling the dark population of France and Britain, and it's giving them a great deal of cause for worry. No effort has been made to unite the Afro-American community or the American Negro community with the West Indian community, and then those two communities with the African community, and those communities with the Asian community. This has never been done. And this frightened many interests in this country. Many people in this country who want to see us the minority and who don't want to see us taking too militant or too uncompromising a stand are absolutely against the successful regrouping or organizing of any faction in this country whose thought and whose thinking pattern is international rather than national. And then if this man over here plays too rough, we got some brothers who can play as rough as he. There's a worldwide revolution going on. It goes beyond Mississippi. It goes beyond Alabama. It goes beyond Harlem. What is it revolting against? The power structure. The American power structure? No. The French power structure? No. The English power structure? No. Then what power structure? An international Western power structure.
And in keeping with that, two, there is a long history of the Palestinian people standing in solidarity with Black people fighting for liberation in America. and actively helping us resist oppressive police states that resemble and are made possible by the same forces as their own. I'm thinking specifically about the Ferguson protests after Missouri police officer Darren Wilson murdered 18-year-old Michael Brown and left his body drenched in blood in the streets. Angela Davis writes, in the case of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, we quickly learned about the militarization of the police because of the visual images of their military garb, military vehicles, and military weapons. The militarization of the police in the U.S. forces all over the country has been accomplished in part with the aid of the Israeli government, which has been sharing its training with police forces all over the country since the period in the aftermath of 9/11. As a matter of fact, the St. Louis County Police Chief, whose name was Timothy Fitch, and St. Louis, of course, is the setting in which the Ferguson protests and violence took place. Ferguson is a small town in St. Louis County. This chief received counterterrorism training in Israel. County sheriffs and police chiefs from all over the country, agents of the FBI and bomb technicians have been traveling to Israel to get lessons in how to combat terrorism. She continues, what was interesting during the protests in Ferguson was that the Palestinian activists noticed from the images they saw on social media and television that the tear gas canisters that were being used in Ferguson were exactly the same tear gas canisters that were used against them in occupied Palestine. As a matter of fact, a U.S. company, which is called Combine Systems Incorporated, stamped CTS on their tear gas canisters. When Palestinian activists noticed these canisters in Ferguson, what they did was tweet advice to the Ferguson protesters on how to deal with the tear gas. They suggested, among other things, quote, don't keep much distance from the police. If you're close to them, they can't tear gas, because they would be tear gassing themselves. I offer that excerpt to illustrate not just that Palestinians have supported us, or to counteract allegations of anti-blackness, but to demonstrate just how related the creation and maintenance of America's police state is to theirs, and just how the concept of one's liberation being tied to the liberation of another functions in application.
I think part of it, one, is to make sure that we're precise in our analysis. I think sometimes the lack of precision it doesn't lead to anti-Semitism, but it can reinforce anti-Semitic narratives that then can be seized by people in ways that undermine a principled struggle. I'll give you an example. We talk about the deadly exchange often, right? Which is that police officers in the United States are trained in Israel, and some Israeli officers, both in the police and the military force, the IDF, are trained in the United States. It's important to think about that relationship because the two countries sharing information, sharing tactics, strategies, etc. And I talk about this in my book, We Still Here. It speaks to the way that we're entering a moment of hypersecurity in a security state and surveillance and bigger weapons and all these things that both countries play a part in. But when we first started learning about it, people started saying, oh, well, police officers, right in the height of our kind of abolition and defunding, conversation post Mike Brown and then post George Floyd, people say, well, police are being trained by Israel here. And so the narrative was like whispered down the lane before you know, it was like, oh yeah, all these cops that are killing us are getting trained in Israel. So then that becomes what you would call a blood libel, right? Which is sort of, because effectively we'd be saying Israel's the reason why black people are dead, right? That black people Israel taught America how to kill black people. And it's like, America been killing black people long before Israel was formed, right? America didn't need no help learning how to kill black people. And to blame that on Israel, again, like a good faith interpretation would be, well, we're saying that Israeli training tactics did, but another interpretation would be that you're blaming Israel for the death of black people, which is a blood libel. But either way, it's not precise, it's not accurate. The accuracy is in talking about the exchange, and we're teaching each other stuff, and it's not just that we avoid looking anti-Semitic, although of course that's not a bad thing. We actually get a deeper analysis when we understand what does the United States have to teach Israel, and what does Israel have to teach the United States, and what does that say about how not just those two countries function, but how broader countries function. But being precise in the analysis helps us be mindful of that, right? And even in political education, telling people, well, that's a blood libel, and here's what that means is important. I think we have to be intentional about fighting anti-Semitism and speaking out against it. I think sometimes doing this work, you will encounter people who will say something anti-Semitic, and we might be insufficiently vocal in the same way that we might be insufficiently vocal as men when we hear something misogynistic or sexist or what have you. We have to be intentional and vocal about that. When synagogues have been bombed, I've been on the front line talking about not just my outrage at it and denouncing it, but saying, what can we do? How can we help? How can we heal? When Elon Musk a few weeks ago was sort of doing this defund the ADL thing, and again, I'm not a friend of the ADLs. I have critiques of the ADL for Islamophobia, racism, smear campaigns, etc. I have legitimate principled critiques of the ADL, although I share their goal of fighting anti-Semitism. But when Elon Musk did something that I thought was anti-Semitic, even though the ADL and I aren't homies, it didn't matter. I still had to be principled and say, hey, what y'all are doing is wrong. Elon Musk, the ADL's complaint against Elon Musk on this issue is correct. And so I'm going to push back and challenge Elon Musk. So it's about being morally consistent. Right? When someone in our movement it does something anti-Semitic, and there have been moments in Palestine resistance movement, in the BDS movement, in other movements where a prominent member has said something anti-Semitic or done something anti-Semitic where you got to go, okay, we can't endorse this person. We can't support this person, but also we have to publicly challenge this person and denounce this person. That's part of the work, you know? We shouldn't be afraid to speak the truth, but we also have to be mindful of the pitfalls.
You can also see the similarities with how our movements are treated. Remember when Black Lives Matter first emerged as a slogan, for lack of a better term, and white people and oppositional forces bent over backwards, pretending an aspirational goal that Black lives would matter in America, that they would be treated like they matter, that police and white supremacists could not kill us with impunity, was hate speech designed to exclude white people and the people not experiencing our plight, the people that are being excluded from the daily suffering of being killed each and every day by police, of burying Tamir Rice, Latasha Harlins, Breonna Taylor, Elijah McClain, Dan Roy Henry, Dijon Kizzee, Alton Sterling, Eric Garner, and countless others. That's the same treatment Defund the Police got. And it's the same treatment that From the River to the Sea is getting.
Have you ever found yourself struggling to decide who is the oppressor versus who is the oppressed? I'm gonna give you a quick litmus test because it's more obvious than you think. You have to look at who is co-opting the language. Follow me. Starting out strong, we had Black Lives Matter, and shortly after that, it was co-opted to be All Lives Matter. I have many examples, follow along. We have the Black Power movement. This is a movement that happened in like the 80s, 70s, like started the Black Panther Party, was to advocate for more, power for the Black community when they were powerless. That was shortly followed by this movement. Oh, Pookie, I'm not finished. There's the Me Too movement, that was started to bring light to sexual harassment and assault that was happening all over the place, really. That was shortly followed by the Him Too movement, which is a movement, and yes, it is a thing, that was started because people were afraid of men being accused of rape. Unfortunately, I can go all day with examples, but of course there is Pride, which was followed by Straight Pride. Yes, this is a thing. I swear I'm not lying. If you want to know who is the oppressor, look at who is co-opting the language. From the river to the sea, just gotta pay attention. That's it.
The deliberate and shameless attempt to paint an aspirational goal that Palestine would be free from the river to the sea as a call for genocide is disgustingly insane. What's worse is censuring the only Palestinian member of Congress for saying that, while billions of dollars are being sent to Israel to actually aid the genocide of the Palestinian people.
Just calling for the destruction of Israel. What does it mean to say from the river to the sea? First of all, the phrase from the river to the sea is not a Hamas slogan. People say it's a Hamas slogan. Well, does Hamas use it? Sure, I'm sure they do, right? Hamas didn't create it. Hamas doesn't own it, and Hamas doesn't use it exclusively. What does it mean to say from the river to the sea? From the river to the sea means from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. It's referring to all of the land in historic Palestine. When I say in historic Palestine, I'm referring to not just the West Bank and the occupied territories, but what is now Israel, what is the West Bank, what is Gaza, the Golan, the Sinai. I'm talking about all of it. When people say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, they're saying that Palestine needs to be free, not just in the occupied territories, not just in the West Bank, but also in Gaza. It also needs to be free inside for Palestinians inside of Israel. It's a call for everything. Now, has it always meant that? It's meant different things to different people. In the 1960s, the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, were calling for, at that time, a single Palestinian state. That's absolutely true. From the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, to take up all the historic land. That was 1964. And even then, it wasn't calling for the destruction or the killing of Jewish people. It was calling for a single state. The Likud party, this is important, was founded in 1977. And for those that don't know, the Likud party is Benjamin Netanyahu's party. It's a conservative party. It's a nationalist party. You want to talk about nationalism. It is a self-identified conservative party and a nationalist party. And when they talk about Eretz Israel, they're talking about, based on the Bible, all of the land given to the Jewish people being Israel. And the Likud party in their original manifesto in 1977 said that Israel is everything from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. So river to the sea ain't just a Palestinian thing. Israelis, Netanyahu's party has been saying river to the sea since 1977. The call river to the sea is not a call to kill or remove Palestinians or Jewish people from the land. When I said it at the United Nations, it didn't mean that. And when Rashida Tlaib says it right now, it does not mean that. What it means is that when you say river to the sea, you're not conceding that Palestinians will just live in Bantustans. You're not going to allow them to live in a couple hundred ghettos in the West Bank as the Oslo Agreement provided and say that that's freedom, that's justice. No. Justice also means ending the siege in Gaza. No. Justice also means creating equal rights for Palestinian citizens of Israel. In every place that was called Palestine, in historic Palestine, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, everybody should have justice, peace, freedom, safety, dignity, and self-determination.
Not only is there a long history of the Palestinian people standing with Black people, so too have our Black civil rights leaders.
Of course, as an African who suffered under the heels of British imperialism, I can have no love for it, and certainly I cannot love anyone who attaches themselves to it for the foundation of a state and then call this a liberation movement. Liberation movements fight against imperialism. The Zionism is certainly not a liberation movement because it never fought against any imperialism. As a matter of fact, today, Zionism is the baby, child, and infant protector of imperialism in the Middle East. It carries out the interests of American imperialism. As a matter of fact, Zionism and American imperialism is like this. If our tax dollars would stop giving money to Israel, the state would sink tomorrow. And certainly no one can deny that American imperialism is the leading imperialist nation in the world.
The Palestinian struggle is not just a cry for justice. It's a blistering battle for the most fundamental human rights that every living soul on this planet should inherit by birthright. It's an unyielding resistance against the oppressive, suffocating grip of occupation and the callous denial of the most basic human dignity. Just as the civil rights movement in the United States fought against the chains of racial discrimination, so too do the Palestinian people strive to shatter the chains of occupation and tyranny. Never forget, my friends, that the Palestinians, much like African Americans in the United States, have been subjected to a heart-wrenching history of suffering and torment. The birth of Israel in 1948 brought forth the mass expulsion and dispossession of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from their ancestral homes and land. This is a historic injustice that continues to haunt the lives of Palestinians to this very day. The situation in Palestine serves as a brutal reminder of the consequences of colonialism and the ruthless dispossession of indigenous people. It is an agonizing reminder that the fight for justice knows no borders, and we must stand united in solidarity with all oppressed peoples. Let's be unequivocally clear. Advocating for the rights of the Palestinian people is not synonymous with denying the rights and security of the Jewish people. The fight for justice in Palestine is not an assault on any particular group, but an unwavering stand against the policies of a Zionist state that has for far too long stripped Palestinians of their rights.
But just as there is a long history of solidarity between the Palestinian people and Black people in America, so too is there a long history and existing relationship between Jewish and Black people in America, as Jewish people have always fought alongside Black people for civil rights. And I believe that that plays a large role in the perceived outrage of some Jewish people towards Black people who are expressing their support for Palestine.
And I think Jewish brothers and sisters who speak out against Israel on political issues are also dealt with pretty harshly. And I think there's a few reasons for that. I think black people in general just get dealt with more harshly in general, just in the world, right? I don't, this isn't exceptional, right? I think that, again, there's a long-standing Black relationship with the Jewish community in the United States. And so I think there might be a sense of we stood with you. And you see this with some of the angry tweets that came out, right? We stood with you back then, or even now. People like, I marched for Black Lives Matter. Why are you all not standing with us, right? So there's a sense of reciprocity and mutuality that makes people say, okay, you should be standing with Israel because we stood with you. There are long-standing relationships with groups like AIPAC and Black Church and HBCU. So there are all these kind of cultural and political lines. Operation Understanding, where we take the young kids and and send them to Israel on a tour. I mean, all of these things are part of a relationship that is complicated, but it's a relationship. And so I think part of it is like, how y'all going to be speaking out against Israel, right? And again, same thing with our Jewish brothers and sisters who join groups like JVP, Jewish Voice for Peace. Again, there's a sense of betrayal, I think, maybe. The Black Jewish Alliance, critical during the Civil Rights era. It was critical for civil rights gains. It was critical for organizing the NAACP. Jewish Americans stood with Black people as they fought for civil rights. You know, there are coalitions, there are relationships that were forged. And so again, the idea of saying, well, we're going to buck that tradition and do something different, again, makes people question why. And then there are organizations, finally, that weaponize anti-Semitism quite intentionally. They know that the smear of anti-Semitism or anti-Semite is so intense and so vicious and so dangerous, it's so high stakes, that it will stop people in their tracks from making what is a principled critique of Israel. I know people who whisper to me or they text me all the time, yo, I hate what Netanyahu is doing, but I'm not saying nothing because I don't want people to think I'm an anti-Semite even though I'm not.
And I'm sure that for some, there is no internal dilemma as to whether to vocally support Palestinian liberation at the risk of one's career and ability to advocate for Black people here at home. They probably feel as MLK did, and that's that no one is free until we're all free, or that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And they would be right, and they would be right. But I'm sure that there are also people who share MLK's sentiments, and that made them arrive at another conclusion. I've heard people like Dr. Umar express that we don't pay enough attention or any attention to the genocide happening in the Congo, Ethiopia, and other African countries, but we want to pay attention to what's happening in Palestine.
You got 27 million Africans in the Congo, displaced, environmental issues, hunger, poor health care. You got 1 million Ethiopians who've been murdered. You got Sudanese who have died. Ain't nobody said nothing about the Sudanese. Ain't nobody said nothing about the Ethiopians. Ain't nobody said nothing about the Congolese. But you want me to cry tears for the Arabs?
And then there's another thing that I want to add to this, which is that there is a long-standing narrative about Black people and brown people and Muslims that we are anti-Semitic unless proven otherwise. And so if the default presumption is that if you are a Black person, that you're anti-Semitic and you're critiquing Israel, which is a Jewish state, then it's very easy for someone to presume that you are anti-Semitic, particularly when people would argue you have no nickel in that quarter, right? This ain't your business. So the fact that you are not talking about Uganda or not talking about Kashmir or not talking about, the Western Sahara, Morocco, whatever, and you're only focusing on this place, it must mean that you must have a reason for it that extends beyond a political criticism.
And I don't think he's wrong that there are more people, Black people included, paying attention to and supporting the Palestinian cause. That's because people really don't know what's happening in the Congo or Sudan or Syria. People don't know. The average American doesn't know what's happening here in this country, let alone what's going on in countries they've never heard of, never been to, and maybe can't even identify on a map. They know what they're told about, what the media and the government make it a point to force feed them, or what we speak up loudly enough about that it permeates their bubbles. And yes, the fact that the people in the Congo, Ethiopia, are Black has everything to do with why the media and the government doesn't give it the same attention. But that's not grounds for us to disregard the Palestinian people. We're all victims of propaganda and white supremacist systems. We don't cede to their suppression of information and control of the media. We do our part. And that is why my next video is going to be examining the crisis and violence in the Congo that has persisted since 1960 with the direct help of the American government. But for now, we're talking about Palestine. So often, the song on my heart is one that I worry we've all heard so many times that it feels offensive to sing it. Sometimes I want to speak, but I first ask myself, am I saying anything worth saying? Do people need me to tell them that the sky is blue, grass is green, and that America is a pillar of racist hypocrisy? I genuinely wonder whether it's even worth pointing out the difference how Americans reacted, how Americans were allowed to react when Ukraine was invaded versus the response to Palestine. Do people need it pointed out how support for Ukraine was never met with the history between Russia and Ukraine is more complicated and nuanced, that it's not that simple, that you need to know about NATO? But anyone who expresses even the faintest support or even just sympathy for the Palestinian people are at best met with, it's more complicated, it's nuanced, you're uninformed, and at worst, call anti-Semitic terrorists. Even in spite of the thousands of Jewish people condemning the Israeli government, calling it apartheid, genocide, and calling for a ceasefire. Is any of that really going over anyone's heads? That's what I ask myself. I ask myself whether anyone in good faith really doesn't see what's happening and what America's role is and has always been in it. America is a nation of gaslighters, and I mean that seriously. If gaslighting is defined as manipulating someone using psychological methods into questioning their own sanity or powers of reasoning, I can think of no greater example than people sitting in a country that has been at war 226 of its 244 years of existence, that celebrates its violent battles for freedom annually, that has killed countless people in the name of maintaining its own dominance as a world superpower since its inception, and finding the audacity to condemn colonized people of the world as it aids their colonization and genocide for decades. To be surprised that America would fund and support the colonization and/or genocide of a people is like being surprised that the sun rose today. But still, we must resist and lend our voices to the cause, because there is always strength in numbers, and the people can be more powerful than the governments we empower if we choose to be. And that's why, at this juncture, I understand people refusing to vote for Joe Biden unless he stops funding Israel's genocide of the Palestinian people, or refusing to support the Democrats unless they provide a different nominee and ask Joe Biden to step down. I myself cannot vote at all because I am not a US citizen, but I understand and can support people leveraging their vote in that way right now, because there's still time. Because there's still time for the Democratic establishment to do something different, to choose someone else, to give us someone else, because it's very clear to me at this point that Joe Biden has already lost this election. That if it's between him and Donald Trump, he is going to lose. And I'm not saying that because I want that to happen or because I think that'll be better for us. I'm saying that because everything I can see and hear from the people is telling me as much, and I am not going to be blindsided again. 2016 is not going to catch me off guard again. I have more complicated feelings about this than we have time for right now, because I cannot say to people who are rightfully incensed and refuse to vote for a genocidal president who won't call for a ceasefire that American presidents, the American government, has always supported and funded genocides, long-standing rebellions and internal conflicts and wars in other countries, that the American government is part of the reason the Congo has seen nothing but war, authoritarian regimes, and poverty since 1960, and cost hundreds of thousands of lives, and that it's still not true that there's no meaningful difference between a Democratic administration, even a Joe Biden one, and a Republican one, more specifically, a Donald Trump one, for many, many people in this country and abroad. I do worry that people take for granted having elections, even getting a choice, because I am not always sure why people believe that Donald Trump, a man who incited an insurrection, who bucked the peaceful transfer of power, who held himself out as having won the election, has any intention of continuing to even entertain the democratic system or process, that he'll allow for another election should he get a second term in office. It makes me think of a thing David Dole of Rational National said to me.
One thing is in terms of just a transfer of power. Like if one party, you're questioning, are they even going to have another election? I mean, at that point, why are we even having a discussion? Like you want to make sure that party's not going to be in power. If one party is just anti-democracy.
But for now, it really doesn't matter whether I or anyone else thinks Democrats and Republicans are the same, or to browbeat anyone about how much worse it'll still be for Palestinian people and everyone else if Donald Trump and the Republicans come into office and have their way. Because the fact of the matter is, Joe Biden's not gonna win, whether we like it or not. So it is the perfectly intelligent and practical decision and choice for the left and liberals alike to voice that now and to demand that the party give them something else, someone else they can vote for, do something they can vote for, so that they don't lose to Donald Trump and plummet us into an authoritarian, fascist-ass regime that we cannot so easily escape from. It's one thing to have a frustrating system where you can only truly choose between two parties. It's another thing entirely to be void of choice, to have choice and civil liberties entirely ripped away from you. And the Republicans keep telling us and showing us as loudly as humanly possible that that is what they intend to do. But people are not wrong that the Democrats do not truly fight the Republicans back, that they have many of the same corporate capitalist, white supremacist, and imperialist interests. And I mean, it's not like it's the Republicans making the Democrats refuse to call for a ceasefire, or for 22 of them to join the Republicans in censuring Rashida Tlaib, the only Palestinian in Congress. At this point, it'll be the Democrats' fault if they don't listen and switch course and end up losing this election. It will be their fault, but that does not mean that we won't still be the ones that suffer. But that's the Democrats' risk, not ours. And it's important that people fight, resist, and use their voices and their vote, whatever they can leverage, to make the powers that be stop doing what they're doing. If you're thinking to yourself, well, people were able to recognize how the Democrats were different or the lesser of two evils before they knew what they were doing in Gaza, and they were always doing this, so what's changed? Well, what's changed is that people know about it. And when people know better, they do better. And more importantly, they are demanding that the Democrats do better. A lot has gone on online since October 7th. We've seen a lot of crazy posts and comments from all sides, from politicians, from celebrities. And I chose to ignore all of that for this video because, dog, who cares? Who really cares? What I want to do is recommend the following books for everyone who's made it to the end of this video. Because when you know better, you do better. Did you know that Palestine's national animal is the gazelle and that their national bird is the sunbird, or the orange-tufted bird as they call it?